Four Nations Face-Off was one of the biggest events in NHL history, but is the league really trying to make this their new annual event to replace the All-Star Game? Let's discuss. Two suspension stories for the week. We have an update on Ryan Hartman's 10-gamer, as well as a conversation on Trevor Zegras' hit that gave him a 3-game punishment. Sticking with the Anaheim Ducks for another second, they acquire Ville Husso from Detroit, but does this mean that there's more to come with a potential John Gibson trade? In more positive news, Alex Ovechkin continues his pursuit for the all-time goals record with another hat trick as the Capitals continue to soar, adding to his resume a record from 3 different decades. We'll also give you some updates on the wildcard race in the NHL, some news on Mikko Rantanen potentially being traded again, as well as some other trade rumors, and talk about my power rankings, all in this episode of This Week in the NHL. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This Week in the NHL. Before I even start this video, if you hear that buzzing noise, it's like 10 degrees outside. We have snow on the lawn, and old man Johnny is out there mowing his lawn right now. So if you hear that buzzing like me, that's what that is. Honestly, it's kind of amazing to see him doing this with this weather outside, but regardless, the first story we're going to talk about this week is the Four Nations Face-Off tournament. Obviously, it was a huge success, but a lot of people are questioning the future of how this tournament is going to look. And we actually have some news about this tournament with an update provided by Commissioner Gary Bettman. The Four Nations Face-Off was incredible for the growth of the NHL, leaving fans and media with the question of, will this be a one-off tournament or an annual event for the league? Well, this past Monday, Rich Eisen spoke with Gary Bettman about the future of this tournament, and this was his response. Well, I don't know. The success has been so quick and overwhelming, and we've got a lot of things to consider and sort out, including what our own All-Star game looks like going forward. You're asking me the right questions, and I don't have the right answers yet because we've got a lot to work through. It was all good. The Four Nations Face-Off tournament shattered viewership records, with ESPN reporting that 9.3 million US viewers watched the final game between Canada and the US, making it the most watched non-Olympic hockey game ever. Including Canada, the total audience reached 16.1 million, nearly matching last year's Stanley Cup Final Game 7. Now, the NHL did a great job getting back into international competition, but I think you need to walk the line when it comes to how often you're participating in these sort of events. The reason the viewership was so high for this is because of the anticipation, all of the talk that was had before the event, because we hadn't had best-on-best competition in nearly a decade. So I think the perfect model would be to do it every 2 years with a World Cup of Hockey and Olympic event being kind of transitioned within that time. I think if you start throwing in a bunch of other tournaments and doing it annually, it'll become like the All-Star Game and start to get too gimmicky. But overall, I want to hear what you guys think about this. Do you want a yearly best-on-best tournament, or do you think that the 2-year, 4-year model is a little bit better for this sort of event? Next story, or stories of the week, we have some suspension news. Remember on the last episode, we talked about Ryan Hartman suplexing Tim Stützle into the ice off a face-off draw, which ultimately gave him a 10-gamer. Well, Hartman disagreed with the decision and filed an appeal to reduce his sentence, which we now have an update for. Commissioner Bettman reduced the suspension of the Wild forward from 10 games to 8 games in a ruling that was published on Monday. This is the first time that Bettman has reduced a suspension since 2021, when Jason Spezza had his suspension reduced from 6 games to 4. But with suspensions, I like hearing from you guys because I think it's cool to have a bunch of different perspectives. Obviously, a lot of people felt like this hit was dirty with Hartman onto Stützle, but do you think that the NHL did a good job in reducing the suspension from 10 games to 8, or should they have just left it alone because Hartman is a multiple-time offender? Sticking with suspensions for a moment, Trevor Zegras is the latest victim of the Players' Safety Department getting a 3-game suspension for a hit that he laid on Rasmussen. The play in question happened during the second period of Sunday's game between the Ducks and Red Wings. Zegras was shattering Rasmussen through the neutral zone when he decided to make a pass off the glass, and after he released the puck, Zegras delivered a high hit to Rasmussen's head. Now, there was no interference call made on the ice, but Rasmussen went down, missed the rest of the game, and didn't travel with the team to Minnesota for their next game on Tuesday. In a video detailing its decision, the Department of Player Safety explained that Zegras approached Rasmussen outside the window where the check might be legally finished, and that the late high hit made significant contact to Rasmussen's head. That, combined with the force of Zegras' delivery, is why he earned a 3-game suspension ban. Maybe some frustration is starting to show for Zegras, who has played in 30 games this year with only 16 points. Yes, the hit was late, but like every other suspension, I want your thoughts. Do you agree with the length of this one, or do you disagree? With the suspensions out of the way for Zegras and Hartman, let's actually stick with the Anaheim Ducks. And might I add that transition was flawless? Good job, bud. But regardless, what we're going to be talking about here is not more about Zegras. We're actually going to be talking about a trade that was made for the Ducks when they acquired Ville Husso from the Detroit Red Wings for future considerations. And while this might not seem like a huge move or really anything significant at all, what it does open up is a potential trade for another Ducks goalie who has quite frankly been involved in a lot of trade rumors over the past couple of years. All jokes aside, the Ducks are likely making this move because they want a backup behind Dostal when they decide to trade Gibson. Husso is 30 years old and is playing in the final days of a 3-year deal he signed with Detroit that carries a $4.75 million salary cap hit. The Anaheim Ducks are barely at the salary cap floor this year and can fully absorb Husso's contract without any problems. However, they have no reason to do so for future considerations in return unless they are planning a larger move, which insert John Gibson now. Gibson is currently out with an injury, but according to reports by Elliot Friedman, it's not really a serious problem. This could mean that he's potentially going to be back from injury and then on the trading block. And one team that has been linked to him pretty heavily as of late is the Edmonton Oilers. And while the Oilers have said that they're not going to be trading for a goalie, there's a strong possibility that he could be the answer for them in net with their goaltending sliding a bit. If Gibson is traded, do you think that he should go to the Edmonton Oilers, or is there a better place for him to land? Now let's give you guys some quick updates on the playoff race and begin with the East. For the Atlantic, we have Florida, Toronto, and now Tampa Bay in that third spot. The Metro, Washington, Carolina, and New Jersey, with the 2 wildcard spots belonging to Ottawa and Detroit at the moment. Now Boston, the New York Rangers, and Columbus are all right behind them, with a few other teams being close by, making this one of the most interesting races in the East we've seen in a long time. So let me know who you want to see hold those 2 wildcard spots. I think I really like the way that the playoffs are made right now, with Tampa, Ottawa, and Detroit getting in, but I would love to hear from you guys. Now let's move over to the West. Minnesota continues rolling without Kaprizov and now without Joel Eriksson Ek 2, being the third in the Central right behind Dallas and Winnipeg, who's on a 10-game heater. Colorado and Vancouver hold the 2 spots within the wild card, and we have Edmonton, LA, and Vegas holding the top 3 spots in the Pacific. Keep an eye on the Calgary Flames, the Utah Hockey Club, and St. Louis Blues. They're all creeping up in the standings, making the West wildcard race just as interesting as the East. And for our final segment of the video, we have power rankings, with my first team of the week going to the Winnipeg Jets. Jets are on a 10-game win streak. All of their players are playing phenomenally, and Mark Scheifele in overtime gets the all-time leading goals record for the Jets. They've been an incredible story this year, and I really would like to see them be buyers at the deadline. Potentially Mikko Rantanen if they want. We'll have to see. Number 2, the Washington Capitals. This is an easy pick. I considered them for number 1, but when you're on a 10-game heater, I think the Jets deserve that spot. But the Caps are rolling. They score 15 goals like we mentioned earlier in 2 games. Ovechkin is buzzing, and this team is just continuing to exceed expectations with a fully rested roster from having no players in the 4 nations, which is still pretty mind-boggling. Number 3, we talked about them moving up to the 3rd spot in the Atlantic. This is where I have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Kucherov and Gensel are playing out of their minds. Gensel, of course, coming off a great USA performance at the 4 Nations, so I expect him to keep rolling with a bit more motivation. Tampa looks really good. I don't know if they're going to be buyers at the deadline or if they can do all that much, but with their current roster, I think that they could be a tough opponent in the playoffs and will likely finish in that 3rd spot of the Atlantic. So big shout out to them for an epic week this past one. At number 4, back-to-back weeks, the Detroit Red Wings are in my top 5. 8-1-1, a beautiful OT finish by Patrick Kane. They trade off Ville Husso and unfortunately have Andrew Kopp on the IR now, so I actually expect Detroit to be buyers at the deadline, and with the significant cap space that they have, keep an eye out for them. They could be big buyers this year. And last but not least, the Dallas Stars. No Heiskanen, no Sagan. They add Granlund, and they're still rolling and quietly having a phenomenal season. The Stars still have a lot of cap room. They could still go out and get some more players with some of their injuries, but right now, I don't even think it's necessary. They're only behind the Winnipeg Jets in their division, and I don't expect things to slow down. Again, 8-1-1 in their last 10, so the Stars are making my top 5. But this is all I have for this week in the NHL. Let me know what you guys think about all of the stories and news from this week. And as always, drop some stuff in the comments below if you want to see some future stuff in these episodes. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Make sure you like this one and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this. I will see you guys in the next episode.